What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Uncensored Critic podcast. Thank you so much for joining me again for another very special episode with another very special guest. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome along kind of a local drama hero to from Hertfordshire, and that is the great Mark Stratford. Now, Mark and I are old friends and actors as well. Mark is an actor, writer, and dramaturg who is the founder of Stratford Productions based in Hertfordshire. The link to the website and everything you need to know about his work is down below in the description. His first solo show, which I was lucky enough to see the other week in Watford, The Strange Case, an adaptation of The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, adapted from the novel by the great Robert Louis Stevenson. It was staged for 3 sold-out performances at the Pump House in Watford, followed by performances at the Brighton Fringe in 2021. His second one-man show, yes, there's 2 of them, Drama King, which is based on the story of the famous actor-manager Macready, who has a link with Charles Dickens and the inspiration for Nicholas Nickleby. I'm sure we'll talk more of that a bit later. Premiered at the Fringes in Watford and Brighton as well. He's also an actor who has appeared in shows across London's West End, national and foreign tours, repertory theatre, pantomimes, as well as parts in TV, film, and radio. His shows Jekyll and Hyde and Drama King are embarking on a national tour of the UK, details of which can be found on the website below. And other credits include Judge Haythorne with myself, with the OVO Company in St Albans, as well as a smattering of roles in The Effect by the great Lucy Prebble, also with the Company of 10, also in St Albans. So, Mark, how are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you. Hi, Oliver.
How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, very well. Yeah.
Okay, glad to have you here. So, to begin at the beginning, as Dylan Thomas says, one thing I like to open up with is the journey of the actor and going from there. So, I think in your case, acting, writing, and adapting, where did it all start for you? Where did it come from?
Well, I suppose like a lot of actors, it goes right back to childhood. So, it's the classic one of performing shows in your bedroom to your grandparents when they come down, and dragging my brother and sister into sort of homemade shows, which I would lead, direct, write. There was no writing went on, we just threw it together.
Yeah.
And it was and that's been with me all my life. So I would do school assemblies, any chance to perform. I was in school plays, but actually I had a sort of hiatus. I didn't go to drama school immediately. I went and did a degree in physics. There's a long story behind that, but I hadn't necessarily planned to be an actor as a living. That sort of came later, after I came out of university, and then went to be trained to be a teacher back in London. And one of the reasons for coming back to London was I had in the back of my mind getting involved in theatre again. Joined a company in Putney called Group 64, which is still going. They were but that was the sort of nearest company to me, and I got involved in some plays, and that led to me getting into drama school for a postgraduate year, and then I came out and started to work in theatre and education. Is how I got my equity card. I mean, but I'm talking back in 1986. So nowadays, getting an equity card isn't quite so vital to get work. I mean, back then, unless you had an equity card, you couldn't get professional work. So a lot of actors, that was a big challenge for them to get their equity cards. So I got mine through theatre and education, as I say, with a company called the Piper Theatre Company, still operating down in Surrey. And then, developed from there, so repertory seasons, national tours, as you say, and just became a jobbing actor, really, from that point on.
Nice. Which shows across the West End did you appear in? Because I looked, but it's not listed on your website. Which ones did you?
Oh, right. So, well, the first one was Singing in the Rain, which
fantastic.
starred Tommy Steele at the Palladium. I was in the chorus for that, playing various parts. And then I did, I did Peter Pan, the British musical, which was at the Cambridge Theatre. And I suppose the most well-known show was Blood Brothers, which I performed at the Phoenix Theatre, and also we performed at the Royal Alexandra Theatre a season there over in Toronto.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was good.
Yeah. So how was Toronto? What was that experience like?
Toronto's a wonderful city. We were there for 5 months, and I really liked it. You know, it was we went visiting. You've got Niagara nearby. You've got a great theatre community down in a place called Stratford, funnily enough. And yeah, so there's lots of great places to visit. Really well received. The show was. We had a couple of Canadian stars in it, which and we had David Cassidy as well. The late David Cassidy was in it.
Wow.
Playing Mickey. So it was very, you know, we were sold out pretty much every night for the 20-week run.
Wow. I mean,
yeah,
but I mean, that's one of the shows I really miss. I miss Blood Brothers because I was lucky enough to see it in town one time, but then just other things got in the way, and then next thing you know, it was gone, and it was like, oh, it's not coming back. It's really annoying. But yeah, I also mentioned there, like, you worked in repertory theatre for a little bit. What was that experience like, doing like different, like, you'd be coming into work and it'd be a different show every single night?
Yeah, so I mean that's almost gone now, isn't it? The old repertory. I think I came
Sadly,
in right
yeah.
at the very end of. I was lucky enough to get involved with a company which was run by a real old traditional theatre manager called Colin McIntyre, and he was a wonderful character. He's no longer with us, unfortunately, but he ran a weekly repertory seasons up in Chesterfield at the Pomegranate Theatre, and also Nottingham and Edinburgh and Eastbourne. And he would put, you know, 5 or 6 of these, mostly Agatha Christie thrillers. But then there'd be the odd non-Agatha Christie play in there as well. And it was, yeah, you say it was weekly rep, you know, so we'd go up, be part of the company. You're rehearsing one play during the day and performing another in the evening. And I mean, I have to say, I mean, I think you do it was so much fun. It's one of the nicest companies I've ever been part of, and I always look back to the few seasons that I did with, you know, a great affection. I'm not sure what the standard was like. I mean, I think that a lot of corners are cut in line learning and throwing things together, you know, that sometimes in a week is not a long time to put a play on. You know, you literally, people have time to learn the lines, work out the moves, do a few run throughs, and suddenly you're opening on the Monday night. So you're relying an awful lot on I don't know, whatever experience you can draw upon to pull it together.
Well, I mean, what's it like learning like multiple plays at different times? I mean, that's quite, I mean, I thought, because your one-man shows, you know, they're a good hour long each time, you know, that you've got a big chunk of text, but that you've got one focus, whereas with rep you've got like 2 or 3 different focuses, 2 different characters, 3 different mentalities to keep in your brain, sort of all at one time. And what was that experience like?
Yeah, I mean, we used to get the scripts beforehand, so we knew what plays we were doing. So there was time to kind of, I mean, like I do, I suppose the way I learn lines, if you're trying to learn lines, perhaps I will bash through. My preferred method is walking around the park, basically. So I walk around the park. I keep looking at the scripts. Go through the line. I just keep repeating the line. I get to the end of the page or an end of a section. Then I'll try to go back through, see what I can remember, and then just keep building from there. And I can walk around. I can walk around for 8 hours. You know, I mean, my legs are tired at the end of the day, but I will literally just go off with a bag with some flasks of tea and coffee in, and some sandwiches and crisps, and we got some wonderful. I live down in Watford. There's lots of great places to walk. We've got a long canal path which goes the Grand Union Canal, and sometimes I would just walk all the way up there as far as I can get, and then turn around and start walking back. And I've done that for plays as well as, but particularly for my one-man shows. Yeah, the only way is to just start at the beginning and start working through page by page. So if you think each script is about 30 pages long, spaced out, you know, text, get to the end and walk back, and then once you feel like you've got it, then I'll start to record it. So I'll do the same thing, but I'll just walk along, record the whole piece as much as I can remember, listen to the recording back when I get home, mark in the script all the places I've gone wrong, bits I've forgotten. Before I'll go back over them again to see the places I've gone wrong, and then I'll do the same thing again. I'll walk out, record the whole thing, me walking along. I find I can't sit in a room and do it. I can't walk around a room. I have to be out and just focused on that one thing. But yeah, I get funny looks. I get people alongside the canal barges calling out to me, "What are you doing?" I walk along with a clipboard, my script on a clipboard, and I've walked through the woods, and somebody turned to me one day and said, "Excuse me." It was a lady walked past me. She walked past me, first of all, saw that I was muttering to myself, and thought, and then she must have gone about 10 yards beyond me and couldn't help herself. She had to know what I was up to. So she turned around and said, "Excuse me, are you from the Forestry Commission?" And I said, "No, I'm learning my lines for a part." And went, oh, that's fine then. I don't know what she thought. I think she thought I was going around looking at all the trees and marking them down for which ones were going to be cut down or something. She thought I was up to something I shouldn't be, some official. And I get canal barge people, they look at me as if I'm coming along to check their licenses or something, because I look a bit official with my clipboard and I'm talking to myself. But anyway, yeah.
I can see you just walking up and down the canal muttering Jekyll and Hyde, and particularly like the crazy bit where he becomes Mr. Hyde, and I can imagine the looks like, is this guy on something?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's right. You suddenly go, "Ah!" And then a jogger comes around the corner, and you have to sort of pretend like you just, nothing's unusual here, nothing to see.
I think over lockdown, I used to go for walks every day. We were allowed out for one walk a day throughout that time. And I would take my headphones on and I would sing, because I'd lost touch with singing. I thought, all right, I'm going to get back into it now. And so I would make sure I was alone, particularly if I was like doing quite a big song, and I was just like, okay, I'm alone, I can just go for it. But then the amount of times I just got lost in the moment, and I was doing these things, and a family would just cycle by just behind me, and I'm thinking, and they're looking at me like, is this guy on something? And I'm just like, oh God, okay, just pretend that didn't happen. Just cancel, continue. They don't know I'm here. They don't know I'm here, but it's all good. So I think that jumps onto your work in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and Drama King. So we'll start with the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So yeah, what was your first introduction to the book? Was it in school, or was it something you discovered a little bit later than that?
Well, I knew you were going to ask me that question, and actually, I don't know the answer. It's so long ago. I do know when I started the process of thinking about doing it for a one-man show. It was around about 1990. So it took me 24 years from having the idea to do it as a one-man show to actually doing it as a one. Yes, I know it sounds crazy, but see, back in 1990, I was a working actor, and but I'd always had this idea of doing a one-man show. I don't know where it came from. I've always been interested in solo performance, and I thought there was a play with the Actors Centre now. I think it's all changing, isn't it, at the moment with the Actors Centre? But in its going back, it was full of classes. You could, as actors who were acting members, could sign up and do various classes and join certain things. And one thing I joined was a script writing course. But in my head, I was thinking maybe I could use this course to start to develop a one-man show. And that's what I brought to the course, and they said, yep, fine. So I tried a couple of pages of Jekyll and Hyde, and I think I chose Jekyll and Hyde. I must have come across it. It's a well-known novel, but I think I probably saw that I was surprised to find it's actually quite a short novel. It's a novella, really. It's not long at all, 7 chapters, and so it lends itself very well to a theatre adaptation because of its short length. And I thought, I suppose at the back of my mind, but you're as an actor, you're trying to show off your acting range. That's really what I was trying to do. I thought, here are some great characters, Dr. Jekyll, the upstanding, respectable doctor, popular, charismatic. And then at the other extreme, you have the evil Mr. Hyde. And I could see a great opportunity to play both characters and show a bit of an acting range there. And obviously there are other characters as well that get involved. So I thought this could present, it's a well-known story. I can see the opportunities here. And look, this is not an original idea. I mean, there have been so many solo shows of Jekyll and Hyde, I've seen them. I've been to see them through research. So I know they're out there. But anyway, that's what I decided to do. I tried a couple of pages out. People at the course thought, that could work, and with that in mind, I thought, yeah, okay, fine. And then, of course, I didn't do anything with it, put it in the drawer, went on to other things. And then every so many years, I would sort of think, oh, I'll get that out again. Let's have a look at that. And I'd tinker with it a bit and put it away. And this went on for, like I say, 24 years.
Wow.
So I suppose I always thought it never got it to a stage where I thought it's going to be interesting enough to put in front of an audience. Anyway, long story short, I joined the company of 10 in St Albans. You mentioned them. You mentioned the Effect earlier, and been involved with lots of involvement with them. A great company based at the Abbey Theatre in St Albans, through which I met Joe Emery, who was a director, and we got talking in the bar one night. And I said, one thing I'd really love to do is a one man show. And what they have at the company of 10 is a thing called a new view. Which is basically you can turn up in the rehearsal room on a Sunday at 12 o'clock, book it for an hour. Members can come down, buy a drink, go and watch something, a rehearsed reading, somebody trying something out, whatever it might be. So I decided that I would choose one of these spots and rehearse and make that my deadline, make that my aim to thrash the script into shape. And Joe said she'd work with me on it, so the two of us having a collaborator was really important. Someone to bounce ideas off, someone to try out the script for, someone to say that's a bit long, that's a bit boring, or just to help shape a few characters, give you it's really someone to bounce ideas off and someone to collaborate with. So having had that was all we needed, really. And with a focus, with a desire to put it on, I decided I was going to put it on as not as a rehearsed reading. I wouldn't be reading the script. I couldn't see how that would work with a one-man show. I'd bore the pants off everybody. So I just thought, right, let's learn it. Let's do it as if it's a full-blown production. Exactly how I would stage it, exactly how I would put it on in a theatre. It's just in the rehearsal room with a few chairs around, no lighting. I did get somebody to put some sound effects in, which helped, bit of music, bit of atmosphere, but it was during the daylight on a Sunday. I got into costume. I had a costume and what few props I could pull together. So it was, it was a properly presented piece on a lunchtime on a Sunday, and I learnt it, and it played through in an hour, and it was really well received. I got through it. And the company of 10 decided to sponsor me to take it to the Camden Fringe.
Oh, wow.
Which we did, got some great reviews. And I thought, okay, so this show works, that you kind of think, well, okay, it's there. It's there. I mean, because it's out of copyright, obviously it's an adaptation of Stevenson's script, but I tried to use as much of his words and language as I could. And so obviously when you're writing it, you have to adapt it. You have to put certain bridges of dialogue in of your own to connect scenes, or just to get you to the next stage. But wherever possible, I've used his words completely, and I followed the chapters of the book. So whereas other adaptations may go off into imagination and they'll give you a different version of the Hyde story or the Jekyll story or the whole thing, I've seen various versions and interpretations, all really good. This was just a very traditional telling of the story, so it's actually quite suitable for anyone studying the text at GCSE or A level. I get a lot of it's been very popular with schools and students who are coming to see it, parents bringing their teenagers along to try and because it literally does follow the book, so that the stretch of it. So yeah, that was it. And then from there, that was 2014 I did that. We went to Camden Fringe, and then I put it away for a few years, and then my daughter was trying to raise funds to go to VSO, voluntary service overseas, and she had to raise a certain amount of money to do that. And it was that's a charity. I thought, well, okay, why don't I resurrect it, see if I can do one-off performance, and I don't know, sell some tickets and see if I can get people to come along. That was in the end, we only planned to do one show, but because we hooked into the schools thing, and because it was on the text, we sold out within like hours, and we had to put another show in because the demand was so great. And then we put another show in again because that show sold out within. I've never experienced that before or since. In one day, I would put it on sale, walk around the park, probably learning some lines for some other show, and keep checking my phone and see that the ticket sale numbers were going up. So anyway, so we managed to do 3 shows in the end, sold out in Watford. And then in the meantime, I was developing Drama King, and so now I have 2 shows that I thought, right, let's get them both out on tour now, which is the next stage.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have 2 one-man shows in your head now, and then must be just like the amount of line learning must have. I mean, obviously you've got a good grasp on it, but like, is there like I can see like one half of your brain being Jekyll and Hyde, and the other part being Drama King in a way, and then there's kind of a
Yeah,
nice kind of balance in there now, right?
yeah, it's the line learning, I have to say, does get a bit boring and tedious after a while. I mean,
Yes, it does.
I mean, when people say, how do you manage to learn all of that? Well, don't forget, I've written it. So
Yeah.
for all that time I was writing and rewriting the script and everything, the lines do start to pop into your head because you're constantly saying them. So it's not that I suddenly start on the first day of line learning with a script that I'm not familiar with. It doesn't take that long, relatively speaking, to learn it all because it's already there. What is actually harder to learn is that obviously over time, every single time, every single performance, in fact, I've changed the script in some way. Might be making some cuts. Maybe I put a whole chapter back into the script at one point, then I took it out again. Then I might change the tense in which I'm doing a scene, or I might think, or it can be a small sentence, a word, anything. I keep making small changes and have done ever since I started doing it. And that's the hardest thing to unlearn, is that when you come to learn the script again, the muscle memory is so fixed that it's harder. It's almost, you spend most of your time trying to learn the new stuff and the changes that you've made as much as you're trying to just remember the script. I find now that if I haven't come to it for 6 months, I can walk around the park and pretty much record the whole thing, but there'll be just moments where I forget or I've just forgotten and what it'll be is it'll be because I've changed something and I can't remember if I've changed it to that or that, and I have to look at the script to remind myself what it is. So that's the one thing about doing a one-man show, especially when you have gaps in between, is having to think, right, here we go again, I've got to get these lines into my head. And like I say, you just have to plow through, to be perfectly honest. But that's what I find. And then with Drama King again, you spend 3 years writing the script. Well, when you come to finally learn it, you do half know it really, and then it's no difficulty keeping 2 scripts in your head, because it's like, you probably know, once you start to say the first few lines,
that's right,
the next lines, they just seem to come automatically. It's knowing it just comes, the brain just works and just leads you through the script. But being fluent with, I think the secret, certainly with my shows, or trying to feel confident with my shows, is being absolutely 100% accurate on every single word and line that I say, and fluent with it, so that I could walk around and just blah, 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 blah. I could do the whole thing in half an hour, just rattling off the script without thinking, without just muscle memory just telling me. Now, I never quite achieve 100% accuracy. I know that it's always something that I fumble in a show, or mix them. But I would say 98% accurate on the lines. And because what I found is that in performance, that if I go wrong, I can tell when I've gone wrong on a line. And the trouble is that in the middle of a performance, my brain will go, "Oh, you went wrong there. Your radar is saying, is the next bit you're saying correct? Something went wrong." And so it just distracts you momentarily from what you're actually trying to do. The worst case is that you can dry as well. If you're thinking about that, suddenly your mind goes blank. So to me, it's like, it's vital that it's absolutely bedded in, which is why you just have to keep going over and over and over. It's almost like becomes like a paranoia to a point. I almost feel that if I don't run through the show in my head, in the space before I perform it, something's going to be missing. I wouldn't say it was a superstition, but it was interesting that it was interesting that I did Jekyll and Hyde. Yeah, I did the Watford Fringe. I did both shows at the Watford Fringe the weekend just gone. And I did Jekyll and Hyde, and I was very, very accurate on everything, even got all the changes I'd made to the script. It was 99% accurate. And that's because my build-up was I repeated the text script many times in that build-up, and also on the day in the space. Drama King, for one reason or another, the tech went on much longer. I didn't have that period that I built in for my planning to run through it before I did the show, and I was much less accurate on the lines overall in that one, and it really showed. And so I suppose it just proves my point to myself that despite that it can be a bit tedious to keep going over it and so on, there's value in doing so, you know. It basically means every time I come to do a show, I perform it twice, because I do it once to myself, walking around, and then I do it to the audience when they turn up. So yeah, so there you go.
No, I relate entirely, because, you know, we had a great conversation on over Zoom, I think, earlier in the year, because I was preparing for my own one-man show that I was doing in Guildford. It's my final project at GSA. I'm not sure if I told you the title or anything, but it's called, well, you've got the script now.
Yes, that's right.
Inhibitions in Ethanol, yes. Yeah. And it's a one-man show based in a pub, and it's a story about what the barman sees from behind the bar. And I'm in the process now of, I haven't quite put it in a drawer, but it's sitting on my desk every day, just kind of staring at me. So I'm like, we're going to have to make some changes. We're going to have to make some changes, that type of thing. I've got some potential there, but I think it needs a little bit of reworking. But I remember entirely, I relate entirely with what you were saying just now. I had like a week in the studio in Guildford, and I did it like I thought, right, I'm not going to do this every day, because, as you said, it will turn into a paranoia, as you said earlier. So like every day. So I thought, okay, I'm going to have 4 days. I'm going to book the camera out on the 4th day. So I've got 3 days to rehearse it, maybe run through it twice every day. And so you run through it twice, and then, as you said earlier, it's like sometimes you get to a point and you go, like, well, in my case, I got like 80% through it, and then my mind just went, wait, what comes next again? and then you're thinking, oh no, wait, okay, wait, don't panic. It's all there. And then you have to sort of look at the script and go, oh, okay, that's where it is. But funny enough, I have a small confession to make, actually. In the actual recorded version, because I don't know if you've had this, but I was so in the moment and I did it, and then when I watched it back, I said the same line twice in one section. So I said it once, I said another thing, and it's supposed to sort of another line supposed to be there instead, but I said the same line as before, and I didn't realize it until I watched it back, and I was just thought, God, all that preparation has just gone right down the fucking toilet. And I was just like, oh, never mind. But anyway, but it was a really, really fun experience. And yeah, I mean, I'm definitely going to reboot it, and, you know, that's cool to hear about what the Abbey does. I might look into that, actually, and probably get some trials, just trial it down there and see if it works or not. So that's a good idea. So yeah, you mentioned earlier about Jekyll and Hyde being linked to GCSE and A-level text and everything. So from adapting it and reading it and performing it as well, I mean, from I've read the text since I saw the show, and it's a beautiful novel, or novella, I should say. It stands for so many things, like, where in my case I get from it someone trying to discover their darker side, but by doing it in a way that kind of plays God, and like you are going inside yourself. I found a lot of parallels with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, actually, in a way. And so it's someone who is willing to go. Victor actually builds a man in his own image, the creature, whereas Jekyll he creates a persona in his own image, but it's not him. And, you know, I think there's this lovely parallel of playing God, and how the power of ambition, and how ultimately when you do play God, it ultimately leads to death. So Victor dies as a result of creating the creature, and Jekyll, as Mr. Hyde, swallows poison and dies as a result. But he's Mr. Hyde, he's lost himself entirely, and so it's his ego, his darker side, which consumes him in a way, and it gets to a point where he can't control it anymore. And I think in your piece especially, you had that lovely moment where you were Jekyll, and then suddenly you could slowly feel, and that bit when you go, no, and then you become Mr. Hyde, and that shows like the grasp is so strong on it. So that's sort of like, I've got some more ideas written down here, but I want to get your version of it. What does the text mean to you from spending so much time with it, and the message behind it, do you think?
Yeah, I think what's interesting about when you delve into a novel like Jekyll and Hyde is you think you know the story, And it's only when you start to actually really read it and work on it and tell it back to people that you realize you didn't really know the story at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, what's it? We're giving the story away, but that's fine because I think most people know this. But yeah, I mean, the whole you think it's you know, split personality. Jekyll becomes Mr. Hyde, but there's so much more behind it. Obviously, there's the whole Victorian when it was written, and this whole thing of the Victorian gentleman and putting up a front to a public face, whereas, you know, you might have certain desires or sexual orientation or things that you want to do in your private life that you just dare not be exposed in any way. And so behind that, what Jekyll wants, he knows that he's got two sides to his personality. One, which is he is an upright doctor. He wants to do good. He wants to do research. He wants to help people's lives. And on the other side, he knows he has this, what he calls his depraved side, the side that plunges in shame. Now, Stevenson never goes into any detail as to what all of that is. You have to, as an actor kind of, or reader, imagine what Jekyll gets up to in his spare time if he was, you know, had license to do whatever he wanted to. And so obviously I have some ideas in my head to help me kind of just imagine that as he talks about it. But it's left to the imagination. Just the point is that he has this kind of dark side, which in the Victorian society, if it was exposed, he would be, you know, shamed and cut off and everything else. So he has this public face which he needs to preserve. So he tries to separate the two natures, you know, so that what he wants to achieve with his experiment is that he splits his personality so that he can be totally good and just follow one path and be good and do that, and at the same time, yes, follow his other path, the darker side, if you like, again, free. But what happens is when he creates the potion is that that doesn't happen, because he conducts the experiment. When he's conducted this potion, which is going to split his personality, he drinks the potion, and then when he becomes Hyde, when he comes back to his former self, what happens is he's still Henry Jekyll. He's still the same person, but he's still the composite person. He's still the same person. What split off from him is the purely evil side of his nature. So his experiment doesn't actually go the way he wants it to in the first case. And also, it was like when he conducted the experiment, he was doing it, he was full of vain ambition, he was full of vanity and everything. So his evil side took hold, and that's why Hyde was projected, as opposed to if he'd been doing it while he was doing good and under honest ambitions and being a very good person, then the thing that would be the other side of his personality could have been the very good side. So he could have had a purely good personality and still be Henry Jekyll. So anyway, that's one aspect that I didn't realize. And then the other thing that probably brings it in, has modern resonance, is all about drug taking and thrill seeking and addicts. You know, it's about addiction. Once he's gone down the path of Hyde through the use of the drug to a new life, a new freedom, to be able to express himself and do all the things he wants to do that he can't with his public face, it's too attractive to him. He wants more of it, and so he takes the drug more often. He goes out as Hyde more often, and he's reveling in his adventures, and he thinks he's safe from it all. He thinks he's got his whole life set up so that whenever he wants, he can become Jekyll. He can be Jekyll, the good Jekyll, pursuing all his interests and being a good man and doing good. And then whenever he feels like it, he can spring into the sea of liberty, he says, and become Hyde. But obviously what then happens is that out of his control is that the evil side starts to take over. The potion stops to have the same power that it did. He needs to take it more often in order to restore himself to Jekyll, and then gradually the story goes. So basically you see someone who's been that thrill seeker, taken the drug, been the addict to the life they were leading, suddenly sees the whole life crumble. And despite him trying to stop, trying to say no more to that life, he can't. He's powerless to it, and obviously he ends up yeah, dying.
Dying. So but the irony is he is himself, but he isn't when he dies at the same time, and that's interesting. But just hearing you say that, it's there's so many not parallels, but there's so much you can take from this story. Like you said, addiction, it's the desire to find oneself entirely and discover your darker side. And it's almost like you can have connotations of like alcohol abuse, like today, there's drug abuse and everything that you find. There's, I could probably even say, social media even now. It's just like it's like in life you are Henry Jekyll, but on Instagram you become Edward Hyde, and and you project this image of not necessarily evil. I'm not saying if someone has Edward Hyde going around with a broken stick in his hand and with blood all down all down him or anything. Slight spoiler, but hey. But there's it's so interesting about the facets of human nature and this sort of the double nature of human beings in a way, and how we are split ourselves. But I think one thing we have over that, one thing that Henry Jekyll sort of, well, some of us don't have, but is that there is a very good balance that we all exercise every day. This exercise of keeping ourselves in the good and not too much in the bad. And and I think it's also would it be fair to say that ambition or letting your evil side, you've got to keep that in check, otherwise it's just going to take total control? Would that be a fair thing to say about the text?
Yeah, I think so. I think you've got to see the novel in the Victorian context,
Of course, yeah.
And the characters, the way they behave, why Jekyll does this. I mean, nowadays he wouldn't be worried probably about half the things he gets up to. It's that Victorian way of being, and the fact that, and another theme that is in the novel is friendship, and the way that Utterson, who is Jekyll's best friend and looks out for him and is very suspicious of what's happening with this Hyde, who he assumes is a separate person. But Utterson does everything he can to preserve Jekyll's good name. So even though he feels that Jekyll may be being blackmailed, that Jekyll is involved in things that he really shouldn't be involved in, that actually crimes are being committed here by Jekyll, even if it's covering something up or it's and Utterson is a lawyer, a friend, a very, very, very honest man, and yet his first priority is to Jekyll, his friend, and protecting his good name. And because of that, I think that's at the core of the piece. I suppose another resonance with today is people who just, they can't be themselves. I suppose you could call that, if it's a case of somebody wanting to say what gender they are or be accepted for what sexuality they have, and people that are reluctant to or worried about coming out or being honest about that, being open about that. That again is inherent in this piece. Everything that Jekyll does is to try and preserve his public persona. But if he was honest with himself and with the world, none of this would happen. It's becoming easier in our society now, but in Victorian times it was a big thing. And also there was another strand I didn't realize, but when you do research into things, you find that obviously in the Victorian times we did a lot of the empire grew. There was a lot of going into other nations and things, and the Victorian society was opened up to the other ways of living by other nations, other peoples, and so on, which was much freer and than the Victorian society. And there was a real excitement and fascination with these new worlds that were becoming opened up to people's consciousness, I suppose, in Victorian England. So there's also something around that as well in all of this. But it all comes back to somebody not wanting to expose their true self, and people rallying around them to try and protect that reputation.
Yeah, that's fascinating. As you were saying, I did have some dangers of ambition, draw some parallels with Frankenstein. We've covered all that already. Do you think there is a hint of like be careful what you wish for in a way with this text? and like you want to discover something that involves a lot of danger, like drinking an experimental potion in a way. Do you think there is a hint of that in this text?
Well, he knows he's taking a big risk.
Yeah.
He knows that he doesn't know when he takes the potion, he doesn't know what's going to happen. He could die. He could, he knows he's risking death, but he is so he's so desperate to unlock how he feels. This in the case of when you talk about ambition, the ambition is almost separate, I think, because I think Jekyll has ambition. He has a lot of ambition to do good, to be a great medical man, scientist, do research, and so on. And his ambition is there, but what tips him over is the vain ambition. He not only wants to do all this, but he wants to be seen to be doing it. He wants to be famous. He wants to be celebrated and lauded. He's a very, a popular, he would run great big meetings at the National Scientific Society or Royal Society or whatever it might be. He would hold court. He's extremely confident. But I think he's also a bit of a showman. That's how I see Jekyll. And so there's this vanity that goes with it. And it's the vanity that unhinges him. So whilst ambition is a theme in the play in that sense, it's the vain ambition that is the thing that scuppers him. Whereas when he's taking potions, when we're talking about the Jekyll and Hyde thing, I think that is about, yes, trying to preserve the public persona so that he can do that, but also he wants to free himself from the shackles of this constraint that he's under the whole time. He's so passionate, I suppose. He's such a passionate man that he feels like he's a hypocrite, because one side of him wants to do this, but the other side of him desperately wants to go down this path as well. And it's that battle of being a hypocrite, I think, and not being able to be himself that drives him to try and find a solution to this. So he in his head, he wants to be able to go off and just be good and do all of that. And then at the other side, he wants to go off in secrecy, in safety, and follow another path where he is still his true self. But the two things in the Victorian world that he's in cannot coexist together. They have to be separated. If he can separate them, then he can lead two separate lives and be satisfied with that in a way. He's still not coming out. He's still not being open, is he, to the general public as to who he is? But I think that's what he's trying to achieve. That makes sense.
Yeah, no, it really, really does. It really does. I think there's a lovely thing about I've written down here faith and science, how you can't tackle those big philosophical questions yourself or with others. Trying to know or playing with forces beyond your control ultimately leads to death, if that makes sense. It's just a stream of thoughts, really. But there is a deadliness in that concealment, isn't there? I hope I'm not repeating myself here, but you conceal part of your soul or of your physical self to sort of keep you going in a way. And like you said earlier, the Victorian times, if you weren't part of like what they called the natural order in inverted commas, you were outcast, you were cancelled, like as we say today, cancel culture. But in the Victorian times, you were it's like you wouldn't receive your post in the mail or anything like that, and it'd be like silly things like that. But and it's
I would say what happens with Jekyll when he becomes Hyde, and what stops the whole plan really for him, or what is the turning point, is that Hyde, because he's tried to keep Hyde at bay for so long, he goes through a period where he says, I must choose between them. I cannot continue to be both people. So he chooses to stay as Jekyll, and for 2 months he tries to lead a life of severity and good and everything else, and yet the inner struggle is there, so that he finally takes the potion again to become, this is the addiction piece, this is the cannot avoid it, going down that path. But because he's kept his inner being pent up for so long, the moment he unlocks the evil Hyde. It's as if Hyde comes out with all that pent up energy, frustration at being locked, caged in so long, and he commits a murder. And it's the murder that is the turning point, because not only does Jekyll have memory of what Hyde gets up to, this is something that Jekyll cannot cope with at all, that he's caused the murder. But also I think, and he then decides, that's it, I must stop it. But I think if you're talking about like somebody going down a path of taking a drug or taking risks or doing something, you sometimes aren't aware of the consequences that could lead to, whether it could be the death of somebody that you're involved with as a result of your actions and consequences. Drink driving, I suppose, or something like that could come into it. That risk taking that could lead to a serious occurrence is also a part of it, and it's what, like I say, turns Jekyll to try and stop that happening. And then, of course, Hyde now can't live the life that he wants to, because he's a hunted criminal. So the whole thing is for both characters, it's a terrible occurrence, and it stops them living. Neither of them can live the rest of their lives as they want to. There's no coming back from it, really.
And there's kind of a hint of
it's a bit of a tragic story, really, isn't it?
It is. I was thinking, like, just now you saying that there's a hint of like depression in a way. Maybe this is Henry Jekyll's way of, the feeling I get now is this kind of subjugated or kind of concealed depression in a way from Jekyll's part. I think the final, even just like with the final line of the text, let me just see if I can find it. It's like, here then, as I lay down the pen and proceed to seal up my confession, I bring the life of that unhappy Henry Jekyll to an end. And it's just even that small bit, and then I'm start thinking now of someone trying to present themselves in a different way. Do you think I get the vibe of escapism in a way. He wants to escape from his core self and become this person that has this charisma, I think that he doesn't have naturally. Would that be a fair thing to say?
No, I think, I would say that Jekyll has charisma. He has all of that. And I think Hyde has it as well. I think there's like I say, it's left to the imagination what Hyde gets up to. You can imagine he gets up to just about everything it's possible to get up to. But he has such, my imagination of Hyde is that he is so powerful. If you're in his presence, you cannot take your eyes off him. You're repulsed by him, and yet in some ways possibly excited by him as well. Do you know what I mean? He gets up to, goodness knows what he gets up to, but he gets up to it. He has the money. He has the money that Jekyll has. He gives Hyde his own existence financially, and his own house and good clothes and things like that. So Hyde, if you had the means in those days and the money, I guess you could pay for all sorts to happen and all kinds of things. So I think so I think charisma is something that they both have a lot of.
There's that animalistic side of both as well, which is quite interesting, that charisma sort of, and the natural urges in a way. There's kind of a lot of that instinctiveness about this text and about these characters in a way, and shows human beings in a way that, as we've been saying for the last sort of few minutes, is that concealment and that need to really hide something within a society which would banish you if you were to acknowledge that in a way. And I think there's a really interesting thing, and I think that's why it's just one of the most celebrated pieces of text, I think, over the last 120 years.
I think because there's so many themes running through it. So many interesting themes for people that are still relevant today. Absolutely.
It's just shy of 60 pages, and it says so much about a lot of things. So just got a few more questions for you today, Mark. I think it's been great to hear about the messages behind it, and I hope anyone listening or watching has had the chance to take from this. If you do have any more questions about it, please do send them in. Yeah, I'm just from a dramaturgical perspective. I know we talked about this earlier in the year, but how did you go about creating the one-man show?
Okay, so going back to the beginning, I mean, you take the novel. I think I photocopied it, is what I
Yeah.
did, each page, put it in a big folder, and then just went through, well, making cuts basically. So thinking, what are the key elements? Where's an awful lot of narrative that isn't required for a one-man show? And you just start making cuts and so on, with a pencil and rubbing it out, and making notes in the margin, and that process can take ages. I mean,
Yeah.
especially if you're putting the script down and putting it back. But basically you get to a point where you've been through that process, and then you've read it through, and then maybe you've rubbed a bit out that you cut, you think, oh no, that's quite good, I'll keep that back in. And then you might write down, you think, well, I'm gonna have to bridge between this bit that I've cut here and there, and so you start writing notes in the margin. Then when you've got it to a point where you think, well, I've now got this structure, you might read it through and see what the timing is, rough timing. So if you're still at 2 hours long, you need to go back and keep cutting or doing something, right? But if you're reading it and it's about, I don't know, an hour and a half, so you think, right, okay, fine, then I would just literally type out the whole thing as if it's a whole now first draft of the piece. And then start the process again. So in that, I've got everything I need, beginning, middle, end. One of the hardest things actually, but once you crack this nut, and this is the case with both my one-man shows, is how to begin, what's the in to the story.
Yes.
Do you tell the story in the first person or the third person sort of thing? Do I, I couldn't see how I was going to tell the story. Do I tell the story as Jekyll or as Utterson or both, or do I have a separate narrator who's kind of how do I structure this as a one-person show? And keep the thing moving. And I can't remember now how it came to me, but he's only mentioned once in the novel, but Inspector Newcomer. He's only mentioned, I think it's not a big part. It's just that Inspector Newcomer was investigating the murder that took place. I thought, well, okay, so the idea came to me that the setting for the show will be a police station, like an interview, like a conference room at a police station, the day after the events at Dr. Jekyll's house have taken place. Jekyll's died or whatever. Obviously, everyone now knows what's gone on. So we're so I thought, if I set it in a police room and I have the inspector who kicks it off as if he's talking to public, press, whoever needs to know about this. The audience for this is never defined. He just starts talking to the audience who represents this group of people, to set the scene that we're now going to hear about the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Hyde. Mr. Utterson has made a statement. He knows all about it. He's going to tell you the story, what happened. And so suddenly you have the premise. So it's like, you've got to find the premise of the thing, first of all. Once I had that, then I knew I was dealing with the inspector handing over to Utterson. And the bit that I didn't know if it would work is, can the inspector suddenly say, right, now over to you, Mr. Utterson, to tell us your side of the story? And we tried it. You came to see it.
I did.
It seems to work, right? One character literally hands over to another character. I change position on stage, become the other character, and carry on talking. And then at some point, the inspector takes over again. Before I know it, I'm into Hyde again. And so, and I found the structure. Once you've got that, then writing becomes so much easier, because now you can really flow with it. So you take your first script, you bash out, get that kind of initial framework in place. That's where I've probably invented most of my own writing appears at the very start of the show, to set the scene, to do it. But you try and do it in the style of Stevenson's writing, and then at some point it starts to morph into Stevenson's writing, and from that point on, it's just a question of reading, editing. The biggest part of writing or adapting is editing. It goes back to when you talk about one-man shows and solo performances, stand-up comedy comes into that. But everything I've learned, because did a bit of stand-up comedy as well, I think there's obviously a solo performer in me, always has been, one way or another. But the one thing that I've learned, and I'm sure other writers say exactly the same thing, is it's in the editing, just constantly trying to, each sentence and each line, what's the most economical way you can say it? Where is it overwritten? And you have to be careful you don't pare it down absolutely, because sometimes within there can be something that reveals character or style or something. So I sometimes find I cut a line only to put it back in because it just feels that something's missing. It's an instinctive thing. It's just, you just go back through first draft, then you get a second draft, then you get a third draft, then maybe a fourth draft. And I probably got endless drafts of the same thing, but each time something has changed in it. And then the other thing is turning it all into present tense. So a novel can be written in the past tense, but when you're performing it to an audience, if you can transfer it into the present tense, it becomes like it's happening now. The audience tunes in a different way. So the entire novel, if you read it, it's always in the past tense, reflecting what happened. When you come and see my show, it's entirely in the present tense. It's told in that way. And it probably not something that's obvious to an audience, but if I tell you, you might think, oh yeah, that's right, it was in the present tense. And it's vital. I find that's absolutely vital as part of the storytelling process. So yeah, and then basically you have your script. I get my collaborator, we start working through it. We realize still some bits are clunky, don't work. I go away, I rewrite them, we try them again. You pare it down you're aiming for an hour. We were at the beginning, an hour, which is what we achieved. And then at some point you have to say, right, stop changing the text now. I have to learn it. Okay. And then you make sure you plan that in enough time before the show. You start to learn it. I walk up the canal, and then basically I would come back and just perform it at the early days to Jo in her room. She'd sit there very patiently and watch me bash through it. We'd talk about it. I'd go away, come back and do exactly the same thing in the run up, just like you would rehearse any show. You think about costume, you think about how you want to, what bits of furniture, props you need or don't need. You start to work on the moves. And so through a rehearsal process, a proper structured rehearsal process, that you would normally go through any show, it starts to come together. And that's it. And then once you put it on, I video it, record it, watch it back, give myself pages and pages of notes. New line ideas appear. I come back with a whole load of suggestions, back to the script, make a new a version of the script, relearn it, restage it, re-rehearse it, back out again. And every single show or performance I do, I try and video it if I can. Even rehearsals, I watch every single one, make loads of notes, keep doing it. I did it at the Watford Fringe. I've got some changes even now I still want to make to Jekyll and Hyde. It's a bit of a continuous improvement process. And that's it. You just never stop really. I would like to get to a point where I really do draw a line under the script. I'm almost there, but I say that every time, and I'm still making changes.
I was thinking, do you think you'll ever have a definitive version?
Yeah.
I can't do any more with this.
I think I'm almost there. I think I am almost there. Yeah, almost.
No, the version I saw in Watford recently was, I said it to you after the show, but I thought it was spot on. It was really, really cool. And as you said, they're continuing like in real time. That was a really nice touch as well, because we, the audience, then followed you along with the story happening in real time in a way, which was a really nice thing to do. I'm just thinking, what else have I got down here? Veins of Ambition. Oh, we've done all that one as well. I think you've kind of already, you've answered that one from a dramaturgical perspective. Oh yeah, okay. Here's one. So obviously it's adapted from a novella or a book. So how did you probably already answered this, but how did you sort of go about making a book into a piece of theatre, and how were you looking for key theatrical elements? Would you think, okay, this has potential or this has potential, or is it just a case of finding the right words and therefore they are theatrical anyway?
Well, I think you just start with what you got. So you see, once you've done like I say, the cutting and the editing of the first, second, third drafts, and you've got your you see what you've got. You can see whether you've got the right dramatic shape for it, because obviously I think one thing that occurred to me, you don't want to show Hyde. Hyde is he's like the climax of the thing. If you show too much of him too early, there's nothing to build towards. It just so happened that the structure of the novel doesn't reveal Hyde too early on. You get a little little taster of him, very short scene at the very beginning, which hopefully just hooks the audience in to want to see more of him.
It really
And then
does.
we don't see him until really it's the last 20 minutes of the play, and then he is really the star of the show. But because you've been building up to that, that's the climactic piece. You've got to see it as it's a story that must. This is why I chose it as well, because I knew that there was a climax to it. I could see where that was going to come. So you're kind of looking for, have I got enough variation in it? So the inspector was an important character because Utterson does a lot of the narrating. He does a lot of the emoting and the telling of the story quite passionately. But you can only listen to his voice for so long. And then you've got to change it. So the inspector, who, you know, he is a bit of a gruff old, you know, been there, done it all, seen it inspector. A slight, possibly a caricature, some might say, but I'm hoping not. I'm hoping I'm achieving something that's more towards a character, but nonetheless, you know, a London-based copper in the old sense that you might have in Victorian times. Very wise, but you know, but there's a reason for that, and that's because the contrast between the posh voice of Utterson, the posh voice of another character, Enfield, and again Dr. Jekyll, those three characters are all quite similar. So trying to make distinctions between them becomes less vocally, although there are vocal distinctions I tried to make, but the physical side of things, their characteristics physically, is another great differentiator. But so you need a voice in there that really changes it up. So quite deliberately, the inspector appears at the beginning. Then he comes in at a certain point when I feel like the audience has probably had enough of Utterson, but happily it marries up with when we want to talk about the murder. So that's the inspector talks about the murder, not Utterson. So if you think about it in the novel, it would be Utterson talking about that, but I think it's the inspector. You transfer things, and then I'll introduce Enfield, and I'm thinking, yeah, great. We've got another character coming in there. That's going to mix it up a bit, keep it interesting. Not too much of Utterson, into the inspector, back to Utterson. Oh, now we can introduce Jekyll. Yeah, we've been building up to Jekyll. Oh, and then Dr. Lanyon appears. And so it's nice to feel that structure coming on, and then getting to Hyde at the end, as I say, as the kind of climax and the build up. It just works really well structurally.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful piece. Yeah.
So when you talk about what you're looking for in the script, it's all those sorts of things. Try and bring some humor in. It's hard to bring a lot of humor into it, but wherever possible, there are a couple of moments that the inspector could be seen as a slightly comical figure. He's not laughing at him, but he's a light relief. I suppose light relief is the thing I'm looking for. Pockets of light relief wherever you can get it. Pauses where you can. I have things where I write in my script breather. So like, you know, after the first 15 minutes, breather. Utterson stops, puts his wine glass down, doesn't say anything for about 30 seconds, sits, then starts to speak. These are all kind of things that I've got about 5 breathers in the script, and they're really important to make sure that you give them the time to allow the audience just to, you know, take stock as well. So there's lots of things like that. So that's another layer that you start putting on once you've got your script. And that's what I mean. It's just a constant process of honing, and then you have to put it in front of an audience and see how it plays, and then watch it back and see, were you boring or not? Or, you know, because that's what you're looking for. You know, does it dip at any point? You know, oh God, I know that's too long. I need to cut that. I need to put something new in there. I need to change something. You can feel it sagging. So anyway, that's it. I could talk forever about it. It's obviously a process I find fascinating, but I'll shut up now.
Absolutely. No, it's great to hear it, man. It's great to hear it. Again, you know, there's that feeling of, you know, okay, is this bit too long, or is this bit too, you know, I'm talking about my own show, by the way. So, but with yours, I have to say the inspector had that, you know, if I may, just slight spoiler on your show, if I may, you get to the end of Jekyll and Hyde, your adaptation, and it's been really intense, and then suddenly you just go, is it just me, or is it hot in here?
Yeah.
You're just like, yeah, it is a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I get a bit sweaty during it. It's quite a physical show, and I gave the inspector a handkerchief in his hand as if he's mopping his brow all the time. But basically, it's just because it gives me respite gives me a chance to wipe the sweat off without, within character, as it were.
Yeah, I like how you put in your script, you said if the actor is sweating, then by all means use a
By all means,
handkerchief.
use a handkerchief and it's an ad lib which I put in, which, yeah, like you say, it's a nice bit of humor at the very end of the show. You have all that build up, the tension, and then suddenly you pop it with the inspector, just the simple line, and it diffuses it, and it gets a nice laugh at the end of the show, and it's a great way to finish it, actually. And you see, that was a suggestion to me from another actor who came to see it. I used to end the show with the death of Hyde. He took the potion, he died, lights came down, end of show. But it was suggested to me as I started the show with the inspector, why not end the show with the inspector? And during a run of the Watford, the one I talked about previously, in between those two of the shows, I went away and rewrote the ending, so that he then becomes the inspector. And it's things like that, talking to people in the bar afterwards, getting a bit of feedback from people, and they say, "Well, about this?" and just being alert to good ideas and good suggestions can make such a difference. So I think it really adds something to the show. This simple suggestion that someone said in the bar after the thing.
You pick them up anyway, and I know I've sent my stuff over to you and stuff. I welcome any feedback from on your part at all. But
sure,
but you pick up things from different people, and then sometimes I remember with my show, you go to sleep at night still thinking about it, and then you remember like another, because mine's set in a pub, you think, oh, do you remember that time with that? Oh, that's definitely got to go in. Well, we definitely got to use that. It's like you live with it from time to time, because it's your show and everything, which is great, which is really good. Wow. I know time is slightly against us right now, because I know you want to shoot off to other things. So we've just got one more question for you today, but just before that, just thank you for just you're pursuing the idea of Jekyll and Hyde and performing it, and just showing that the work you've done, and for sharing all that today. It's been really, really great to hear it, Mark. So thank you for your time today.
You're welcome.
And so yeah, just to finish on, this is something I ask all my guests, which is, what's been an experience or experiences that you've had to date in the acting world which you'll never forget?
Oh gosh. Well, okay. I mean, the one that comes to mind really is Blood Brothers in Toronto. So I was playing I don't know if you know the show, but
of course,
Mr. Lyons is the father of Eddie, who's the two brothers. One goes to a posh family, one goes to a poor family. Eddie goes to the Lyons family. I played Mr. Lyons, so that was my role. But I was also contracted to understudy the narrator for 5 performances. So the narrator was a chap called Michael Burgess, who was a big Canadian star in Les Miserables and things like that over there.
Oh wow.
But he knew that he used to do sort of gigs around the country, his own show, and he had 5 dates or so that he knew he was not going to be able to do Blood Brothers. So on those dates I knew I would be playing the narrator. And I just remember the one night when I did it, because Blood Brothers always used to get a standing ovation. It just did every single show. But there's just something about doing the narrator, coming on. I was part of the lineup and the bowing, obviously, and the standing ovation every night, so I knew what it felt like. But it felt something was very special about standing between David Cassidy and Amy Skye, who was playing Mrs. Johnson, right in the middle of them, and being the understudy. And I think David Cassidy just said, "Step forward," gave me the sort of, "Please step forward and take a bow on your own," as the understudy would come on. And I just walked forward and took a bow in front of literally a full house at the Royal Alexandra Theatre in Toronto, all on their feet, all clapping. I mean, not just at me, they weren't like, they weren't on their feet for me, but as the whole thing. But there was just something about that moment that just stayed with me forever, really. I think it was just like that. But as an actor, when you imagine being on stage, or you imagine audiences, you imagine applause, maybe some sort of recognition for what you're doing.
Of course.
I think in that moment, that at least I had it. That was a great moment for me, I just say. So yeah, that's the one that pops into my head. If you gave me a bit more time, I could probably think of hopefully some others. But there you go.
But that's one hell of a story, though, isn't it?
Well, it's a nice experience for sure.
Yeah,
and my wife was in the audience as well. She'd flown over Abbey, yeah. So she was there as well that night, and she managed to actually take a photo of it, which I'm ever grateful for. Me stepping forward, so I've got it in my scrapbook,
I want to see that picture. I want to see that picture. Yeah.
Well, by all means.
Yeah, of course. I mean, if I see Abby in the future, I'll be like, "Hey, you've got that picture of Mark in Toronto." And she'll be like, "How do you know about that?" It's like, "Oh, I know about it." Fantastic. Well, that's one hell of a story. I mean, I can't imagine what that must have felt like. Do you get all layers, all just on their feet, and just
it is. Yeah, it's wonderful.
That's very nice.
Very nice. Yeah,
that's fantastic. Let's just have the time. Okay, cool. Yes, Mark, thank you so much for today. Well, what a story to end on. I mean, that's just again, I've said this twice now already, but that's fantastic. But Mark, thank you so much for today. I've really learned so much more talking from you, and Jekyll and Hyde, and I'm sure your other show, Drama King, as well. They're just going to go from strength to strength, and I look forward to the day where you think you'll come to me and say, I have a definitive version of Jekyll and Hyde. I don't need to do any more work. It's all there. That's all I'm going to do. Now, of course, you get there, but I look forward to more work that you do. Please keep up with these one-man shows. I'm dying to see what more ideas you got, and of course, good luck with the tour as well, which you'll be doing from later this year and into next year as well. As I said, details down below, guys. Go get your tickets. It's an experience. If you're studying the text or just like the book, it's one hell of an experience. So get your tickets while you can, and go and see Mark where you can. And Mark, thank you so much for today. I'll finish the recording. If you just hang on after I finish, I'll say goodbye to you one-to-one. But guys, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. This has been the Uncensored Critic. I'll be back soon. And Mark Stratford, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.